Some people think that when you delegate that somehow your quality has to decrease. Well, that's a joke, folks. That's not true. Not even close.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
You know, we do spend a lot of time here talking about the law of delegation, and there's a reason, right? It's one of my favorite pet projects because, well, let's put it this way. We all are given the same amount of time. This is the way that you can get back some of that time to reinvest in other parts of your life, maybe other businesses, maybe marketing, maybe, I don't know, your family. How about yourself? When was the last time you pampered yourself? But one of the concerns that comes up over and over again in my coaching is how can I afford it? And really the bigger question, Dustin, is how do I know whether or not I can afford it? I don't want to hire somebody and then have to turn around and let them go. Well, because I can't afford to pay them. I'm going to share with you a couple of ideas today that I think will help you to get over that hump. But first, I want to remind you of some great companies out there that will help you to get over the hump of stagnativity. Yeah, I just made that word up. Or being stagnant, staying where you're at. Folks, it's time to move outside that bubble. It's time to use a software called a la mode. A la mode, of course, is the software that leads everybody else in report writing, and there's a reason for it. alamode.com or 800 alamode. If you need help importing data and saving time on your reports, Spark is the place to go. Go to spark4appraisers.com. That's spark, F-O-R, appraisers.com. And finally, we are sponsored by the great Working RE magazine. Just this morning, got an email from them, and I knew I didn't have time this morning to read it, so I snoozed it till this afternoon. Just got done reading it right before I came on the air here. Great article, great magazine. WorkingRE.com is where you find out more, WorkingRE.com. All right, folks, let's set this up by talking a little bit more about the law of delegation. Are you tired of hearing me talk about the law of delegation? I hope not. Folks, it has transformed my business. It has transformed my clients' businesses. It will transform your business when you get the idea that you don't have to do everything yourself. Do you know how tired I am of appraisers saying, well, I have to do that. The state makes me do that. Really? Does it? I mean, really? As long as you are doing this correctly and you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, I would question your ideas. I would question your thought process as to whether or not you actually, quote unquote, have to do what you think that you have to do, right? The law of delegation is saying, listen, if I can move this tier 1, tier 2 level stuff over to someone else, well, guess what? That gives me more time to work on my stuff. That gives me more time to be an appraiser. That gives me the better opportunity to have more quality. Some people think that when you delegate that somehow your quality has to decrease. Well, that's a joke, folks. That's not true. Not even close. Think of it this way. If you're so busy doing data entry that you can't take time to really step back and analyze the property, right? That's number one. Number two, how many sets of eyes do you have looking at every report that you do? If you're like 80% of the appraisers out there, you got one set of eyes looking at that thing from start to finish. And some of you are going to argue, well, that's the best thing. You get, if you get a bunch of, too many cooks in the kitchen. Okay, I get that analogy, folks. But if you have a system to where the cooks each have their thing, right? You got a sous chef. You've got somebody that does the meat. You got somebody that does the salad. Folks, it works, and it works well in big kitchens across the world. So I think that analogy is kind of silly because the principle itself works if you have a system to make it work and the technology set up to do so. That's why I teach that there's 3 legs, not just one, not just 2, but 3 legs to a successful business. Those are technology, systems, and human resources. Human resources is just one of those legs. And if you try to do the law of delegation without putting into place the right technology, folks, it's going to fail. It's not going to work the way that you want it to work. And if you try to do either of those 2 without the systems to make it work, and what is systems? It's simply processes. Right? Whose job is it to do what, and how do you do that job? What is the checklist to do this particular task? That's all systems are. Those systems are constantly improving. I was actually on a phone call with one of my mastermind students just this morning who reached out to me and said, Dustin, I'm in the process of setting up my systems, and I'm worried that I'm spending all this time setting them up, and then they're going to change. And I said, well, guess what? I'm going to stop your worry. They will. There, you don't have to worry anymore. If you're worried about whether or not your processes are going to change over time, they will. You don't need to worry about it. It's a living, breathing document. It's one of the reasons why I say when you create videos that show what you're doing in your office, that you do short videos, okay? That you don't do the whole page one on one video that takes 30 minutes. You do the subject section at the top that takes 5 minutes, right? And by doing that, if that process changes 6 months from now, all you have to do is switch out that 5-minute video rather than switching out a 30-minute video. But this idea of trying to implement people into your business without a system, that's when people fail. And by the way, this is a conversation that I consistently have with people. When I say, hey, what about the law of delegation? What about hiring a VA? What about hiring a customer service rep? What about hiring a fill in the blank? Inevitably, they'll either say, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Or they say, yeah, I tried that. It didn't work. Okay, I could take that at face value. Okay, great. He tried it, didn't work, moving on. Or as a good coach would, I'm going to ask additional questions. I'm going to dig a little bit further into their psyche and say, okay, well, let's talk about that. When did you do it? What did you do? Let's dig into the details. And inevitably, folks, and I'm sorry to just be so blunt here, but they did it wrong. I mean, now, can you do it right and still have a miserable failure on your hands? Absolutely. Do I hire perfectly all the time? Absolutely not. I just had to let somebody go last week that I had very high hopes for. And that I did all of the crossing of the T's and dotting of the I's. And folks, sometimes it just doesn't work out. But for those that say, hey, I tried the law of delegation and it didn't work, 9 times out of 10, it's because of them, not the person you hired, you. It's your problem, right? Because you didn't do it correctly. And if you will go through the process correctly and do things correctly, folks, it makes all the difference in the world. It truly does. Now, does that mean you're going to have perfection? Of course not. I think we've established that. But it does mean that your likelihood of success is going to be much, much higher if you have a process set up in such a way that it will work accordingly. Okay. But even with all of that, once someone is on board with this idea of the law of delegation, the next hurdle that we have to overcome is, yeah, you guessed it, can I afford this person? And that's the question on the table today that I want to address. Can you afford this person? Now, the snarky side of me will say, well, can you afford not to have this person? And granted, that's maybe a snarky and inconsiderate way of approaching it, but there's a lot of truth in that comment, right? Which I'm going to get into, okay? Let's back up for just a second. Let's talk about your finances. Okay. And finances are boring. Finances are math. Nobody likes math. It's tedious. But here's the thing, folks, the numbers don't lie. And you've heard me say this before. If you know your numbers, you know your business. And you've heard me say that many, many times, of course. But it's true. If you really understand where your numbers are, you can start to answer the question on the table today. The question on the table is, can you afford to hire someone? Okay. Well, if you don't know your numbers, if you don't know where you're at, how would you even begin to answer that specific question? So let's back up. And I've talked about this on the microphone before, so I'm not going to harp on it. Go back to the previous episode where we talked about your percentages, but let's just break them down very quickly. In your overall scheme of things, and talking about gross numbers, right? Gross numbers should look like this. 10% right off the top goes back into the business. That's your rainy day fund, right? That's the profit, if you will, to the business. 20% right off the top goes to you, the business owner. That's not you, the appraiser. There's a big difference. As a business owner, you should be paid for being the business owner. The other 70% should be broken down into salaries, which is about 50%, and overhead, which can be about 20%. Now, as you grow your business, your salaries are going to increase, but your overhead is going to decrease, but you should never go over 70% for both of those two things together. By the way, that includes your salary as a technician. Notice I said earlier 20% goes to you as an owner. That does not include when you go out and do an inspection, when you answer a phone, when you do a write-up, when you choose comps, when you take comp pictures. You should be paid for those particular things just like you would pay someone else to do them. Okay? Now, more than 70% in those two areas is going to cause you to be upside down. And then I would answer this question. If you say, can I afford to hire somebody? If you're over 70% with your salaries and your overhead, then the answer is currently no, you can't afford it, right? If you're not taking home 20% for being a business owner and 10% in your savings, then there's a problem. You're upside down. And you need to figure out what that problem is and either lower some salaries, let some people go, or rearrange your systems so that it works. And there's by the way, there's a strategy to each of those three things that I just laid out. Not the time or the place to go over those today. But my point is if you're over 70%, that doesn't mean you need to lose hope. That means you start to look at things through a different lens and rearrange some things so that you get back down to where you need to be. But that's the first thing that you got to look at is the percentages, right? First on the docket, when you ask the question, can you afford to hire somebody, right, needs to be this answer of, well, where am I at with my numbers? If I can look at my numbers, look at the math, and understand where I'm at, then I can start to answer the question, regarding whether or not I can hire. I got two other things that I want to share with you that I think will open up your eyes when it comes to hiring. But first, I want to open up your eyes a little bit when it comes to software that will allow you to have higher quality reports in less time. Folks, what would it be worth to you if I could say that you could do appraisals faster? And I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say you could do 1 or 2 more appraisals every week because you have the technology to do so. What would that be worth to you? Do the math, right? Again, this all comes down, it's no harder, folks, than numbers. Take out your little slide rule, take out your pen and paper, take out your calculator, whatever it is that you use, start to do the numbers, and you'll realize that whatever it costs, C-O-S-T, to get into a la mode will be rewarded with the value on the other side because it is an investment in you and your company. A la mode is where it's at, A-L-A-M-O-D-E, alamode.com. Spark is helping appraisers to save time by importing your data. That includes your subject data. That includes your folks, it can upload or import 30 comps from the MLS. When was the last time you had 30 comps? Now, I know that some of you are saying, well, yeah, actually, I like to look side by side at 30 comps, but I certainly don't want to take the time to import them. Guess what? You don't have to with Spark. And that's just a fraction of what they do for you in saving you time. Check them out. Go to spark4appraisers.com. That's Spark, F-O-R, appraisers, plural.com. Finally, we're sponsored by Working RE Magazine. Had an opportunity this morning, as I alluded to at the first of the broadcast. Is it a broadcast? It's a podcast, right? At the first of the podcast, we alluded to, by the way, did you know I used to be a broadcaster? That is true. Little known fact of Dustin Harris in his early days. When I first started out today, I talked about an email I got this morning. And here's the thing, folks, it cost me nothing. Cost me a couple of seconds of my time to go to workingre.com and sign up for their free newsletter. And then I get on a regular basis their emails. And Isaac Pegg does such a great job getting out there and getting the real scoop as to what's going on in the appraisal world. I got an email this morning. I just hit the snooze button. I knew I had 1,000 things to do this morning. And then I knew at about lunchtime I'd be okay, probably have a little bit more time to read the article. And sure enough, it popped up in my inbox a few hours later. I read it while I was eating a ham sandwich. And absolutely just great information. Folks, if you want to keep up on what's going on in the appraisal world, check it out. Go to workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. Welcome back, dreamers. Good to have you back on the Appraiser Coach Podcast. My name is Dustin Harris, and we are talking about, well, can you afford to hire someone? It's a great question, and honestly, it keeps people stuck. A lot of people stuck. About 80 to 90% of appraisers out there, folks, either work for themselves alone, or they might have part-time work, maybe a full-time other person, maybe a spouse, somebody else, Aunt Gertrude, whatever. Nothing wrong with that model. It's something that I did for 12 plus years, but I'll tell you there's a better model out there. And the better model allows you to do more, and it allows you to increase your quality, and it allows you to just be a true appraisal firm rather than just an appraiser and owning a job. But as we present this, as I present this to my clients, often they will say, well, Dustin, I don't know if I can hire someone because I don't think I can afford to pay them. Okay, we've talked, number one, about how to find that out through your percentages, okay? Let's talk about number two, and that, of course, is the investment in somebody, the ROI, the return on investment, as you hire and train and start to work with somebody, the opportunity that it now gives you to have increased production. Folks, remember the 3 legs, okay? The 3 legs, we talk about them all the time. It's law of delegation, or human resources, as it's sometimes called, technology, and then systems to allow all of that stuff to work, right? Just a few minutes ago, I talked to you about technology, specifically a la mode, and how it can save you enough time that you could do 1 or 2 more reports per week than you could not do before without, and this is key, cutting quality. Okay? Now, with that comes this idea of investment. Let's now apply that to human resources. If you're tempted, if you will, to hire somebody, remember key number 2 is most likely if, and there's a big if here, if you do it right, they are going to bring you more time. They are going to off-shoulder, is a term I use frequently, off-shoulder what you're doing to their shoulders. They're going to take stuff off your plate. What does that mean? That means that you can have increased production, which means, you can have increased pay or increased fees or increased bottom line, gross revenue. In other words, don't just look at the numbers today. Remember that with someone else allows you to do more, and with allowing you to do more allows you to be paid more, which allows you to now turn around and pay those people that you work with. Folks, if you looked at my payroll, you would be floored. I'm not going to share it here because I really don't want the evil comments. You would be floored how much I pay every 2 weeks out the door for my assistants. But here's the thing. By doing so, we increase our productivity. We are the #1 appraiser in Southeast Idaho. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. We do well over what any of our competitors do. And there's a reason. The system works, folks. And the system works because it's a true principle. So increased production, you've got to consider that when you're looking at hiring someone else. And finally, this idea that I've alluded to a little bit over the last couple of minutes, but just want to bring it home by talking about the vacuum, okay? You've heard the phrase before, the universe abhors a vacuum. What does that mean? Well, that means that when there's a vacuum out there in any space and time, the universe, if you will, wants to fill that vacuum. It doesn't like empty space. And it's no different in your business. When you create space in your business, that universe, if you will, wants to fill that space with something else. Okay, so here's what happens. Again, I alluded to it a few minutes ago, but just to bring it home, when you off-shoulder to someone else, not only will it bring you increased productivity and increased pay, but it also takes more off of your shoulders, which allows you to, do more marketing, spend more time speaking in front of realtors, doing bomb videos and sending them out to your contacts, simply getting on Facebook and advertising, spending more time at the appraisal inspection when the realtor's there, educating, teaching, showing them that you are an expert in what you do. All of these things can happen where you're not feeling hurried and rushed and overwhelmed because you have the opportunity to off-shoulder that to someone else. So the vacuum is created, and thus the vacuum is filled by increased productivity, which allows you to be able to grow and continue to expand. Now, is it possible that you can expand too quickly? Is it possible that you can take this principle to the nth degree and then end up upside down? It happens all the time, right? Have you ever heard the term, they grew too quickly? Typically, what that means is they brought on too much debt right off the top, right? Whether it be hardware, technology, or more importantly, they brought on too many people that didn't have the capacity to keep up, right? All of these principles work, but they work within the realm that they need to work in. You can always take them to the nth degree. But folks, next time you're sitting there thinking, should I hire somebody? If the answer is yes, and the next question in your mind is, but can I afford to hire them? I hope you remember these 3 principles. Number 1, well, the numbers, right? Number 1 is look at your numbers and find out where you're at. Number 2, don't forget the increased production that will come from hiring. And number 3, don't forget the increased ability to bring in more work because of the vacuum that will be created by off-shouldering some of this stuff to someone else. Folks, these are the types of things that we talk about in depth and get into real nitty-gritty detail with about 6 or 7 other appraisers in the same room. We call it the mastermind, and we meet across the nation. We would love to have you join us. Please join us. Reach out to me at thecoach@theappraisercoach.com.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.